You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
I'm Zen. Welcome to Communicate.
And I'm John.
We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today at Monash University, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, the land of Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation.
Zen, I thought before we introduce our guest, I'd like to just tell everybody a little bit about Empower Your English. We're a service that's been going for about 14 months, and our focus is really about not so much teaching English, but we believe very strongly in empowerment and especially empowered communication, and that comes in different forms. So during this conversation, we're going to be talking about empowerment, assertiveness, methods of communication, employment, and most importantly, with the differences between PTE and IELTS, which is an English test that a lot of people may be aware of. So really looking forward to it. And we kick off it now, of course, and we're going to be finishing at 7 p.m.
John, this is really exciting. In the studio with us, we have also other two guests with us, who is Jason and Chris will be chatting with us as well.
And of course, don't forget, I forgot to mention, we have a guest speaker dialing in at 6:15, Don Oliver. He is an IELTS expert, and we can't wait to involve him into the conversation.
Yeah, can't wait. Chris, could you like to tell us more about yourself?
So I am a student here in Monash, and I'm studying an interior architecture course in Caulfield campus. And I am 19 years old, and I'm actually Filipino. Yep.
Yes. We also have Jason as well. Jason, your turn.
Hi everyone. So my name is Jason, and I'm currently studying a double degree in electrical engineering and computer science here at Monash. I'm currently in my fourth year, and I'm also the president of international students at Monash, Clayton.
Thank you. Thank you for your brief introduction of yourself, Jason and Chris.
So now we've got some questions, and these questions, we've got about 6 of them, but at the end of the day, this is about a conversation. So let's just keep it happy, keep it flowing, and there's no right or wrong answers. I think it's just in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here, get the conversation going from different people. So I guess Zed and I do run monthly workshops face-to-face in Melbourne City, and one of our favourite questions we like to ask is thinking about communication, what does the word empowerment mean to you?
So to me personally, empowerment doesn't mean that you have to be perfect at what you're doing in order to feel empowered. It just means that you need to feel confident in order to bring out the best you can at that moment. Now, because this is a talk about empowering your English, from my perspective, empowering international students to use the English more, to be a bit more confident in their daily lives, to talk to not just among themselves, among our own culture, but also to reach out to domestic students, to students from other backgrounds, and to be able to use this knowledge of our English to communicate and also improve.
Interesting, because we talk a lot about it's not just the spoken word. There are other ways that we communicate. What are your thoughts on that word?
Well, I think the word empowerment is really empowering itself. What I think about it is just it's something that you own, I think. Like, you own, like, your language. And I think, in a way, English doesn't necessarily have to be, like, the only language in the world. But because there's, like, learning a different language is already hard enough itself, like Spanish or even Mandarin. So I think with empowering you, like Jason was right, you need to be confident about it, in a way. So I think... And just to be able to communicate and understand one another is the most important thing.
I think so, for sure.
Yes, I totally agree with Jason and Chris as well. Empowerment I think most of the students here are international, or most of the people who live in the Australia have second language as well. Even though English is not our first language, but I think that is really okay to have us to keep the essence, because that is our own style to empower our language to communicate. So we will move to the next questions. So talking about assertiveness, can you share with us when you have to use an assertiveness language and what is the outcome?
So assertive language just basically means that you are giving a differing opinion, but you're not trying to be aggressive about it.
And I think that's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
You know, to try-
yeah.
How do we get the balance right? Because we hear so often you try to, and this goes back to culture and accent.
Yep.
I'm just being assertive. No, you're not. You're sounding bloody rude.
Yeah, there you go. So different culture has sort of a different threshold for when it starts to come from assertiveness and it becomes aggressiveness in a sense. But so whenever I talk to an international students or just any students of other backgrounds, which I might not be familiar with, I might have to be a lot more conservative about how I come off, my tone and all, because there are some students who might be coming from a background where it's a lot more sensitive towards differing opinion, which is not a bad thing. It's just something that we need to actually consider when we talk to other students. There was one student who asked me a question relating to one of our events, and they were giving an opinion which I was not agreeing with, and in response to that opinion, I gave my personal point of view, which that student wasn't very receptive. So I do understand that at that point I might have come off a bit aggressive, and that I needed to tone it down and basically just acknowledge that I have made a mistake, and that I backtracked and tried to work out the difference between us, which in the end we resolved that issue properly. So I was very happy with that.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting how people can be really sensitive, even to one word such as must.
Yep.
Okay, it's very commonly used, and during our workshops, Zen, I think you'd agree that we hear this word come up and we sort of say, yes, I know it's natural, but people can be offended by the word I must.
Yeah, I think so. Like most of the time, because Filipinos usually have an aggressive tone, actually. So, and we find English very intimidating. But growing up in a country where I studied English in a way, I think, the word "I must" is very, very intimidating. I think there are some ways that we have to communicate with others as well, and I think it's all become like it all comes into experiences, I guess, and talking to other people. In a way, so
I'm curious. You say Filipinos think English is. What did you say?
very intimidating.
Intimidating.
Yeah,
Intimidating as in hard to grasp.
like
or-
hard to grasp. Like whenever someone speaks in like English, they think, oh, he or she is well educated or like very rich, because English is not really our first language.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah.
Very good, because I think that goes down to another question we talk about intimidate. First of all, what does it mean, and how do you tackle intimidation? I'll share with everybody right now. I happen to be a wheelchair user, and so to me, communication is really important to be able to not so much stand up for my rights, but in a situation where I'm feeling disempowered or intimidated, I really need to practice the voice. And this is why I love radio and telephone, because they don't see the wheelchair. So, our next question is going to be...
Yeah, so our next question is talking about the intimation. First of all, what does it mean? How do you tackle it, Jason?
So, just for the intimidation, I feel that a lot of people, of course, are naturally intimidated when they are conversing in a language that they're not familiar with, especially to a group of people who they perceive to be much, much more well-educated in that language than they are. Which is completely natural. You are nervous about something that you feel you are not good at. And I feel that is part of why people don't feel so confident using their second language. They feel intimidated. And secondly, because they feel intimidated, it is hard to empower them to become more confident in their daily conversations, just to reach out and to talk to more people. The way in which I've personally tackled this issue is I try to talk to just one person a day. Back when I was still studying English, just one person a day.
I see. Guess what? I think we've got our caller coming in, so we might see if that's Don. Hello, Don.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good. Don, you're live on Communicate. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, my pleasure.
In the studio, we have...
I'm Zen Don.
Okay, hi, Zen.
Hi.
I'm Jason.
Hi, Jason.
I'm Chris.
And Chris.
So, Don, thank you so much once again for dialing in and being part of this interesting conversation. Now, Don, the audience don't know too much about you, so I thought I'd leave that honour for you. If you don't mind, we've got a list of questions, but if you don't mind perhaps giving us just a couple of seconds about your background and about yourself, please.
It's a dangerous thing asking me to talk myself up, of course, but I'll do what I can. I've been involved with IELTS for about 27 years now in various forms, and I continue to be involved in IELTS, and I've taught IELTS preparation for a long time as well at various places. I've taught in Australia, but also overseas quite extensively, mostly in Vietnam and in Oman in the Gulf, Arabian Peninsula, and I think I have enough experience to answer just about any curly question you fire at me. So why don't you begin?
Very good. Okay, I think the obvious one is, and we all hear it all the time, but yes, it's practice and practice and practice. But would you perhaps like to share us, not so much inside information, but from what you've observed over the years, what are other aspects apart from the practice part?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say practice, it's an interesting question, because I have seen a lot of students make the mistake of simply doing a lot of practice tests, doing many IELTS tests, doing many IELTS essays, and quantity is not really so important, it's quality, and I would always recommend that if they do an essay, for example, instead of doing 5 essays in a week, try and make one essay very good by the end of the week. In other words, revise, review, correct. I think that's the way you learn. And when you do a practice test, then really I would also suggest that you analyse what you're doing. Like, instead of simply getting to the end of it and doing... saying, oh, well, I've scored this, and then analyse the reading passage, for example. Analyse the transcript of the listening recording, and see what you can get from that can improve your own English. Because with IELTS, it's a very big test of English, as you know, John, yes. And when you improve any aspect of your English, you're also going to improve your IELTS score. So it's not just looking at IELTS practice tests, it's also using English when you go shopping. It's regularly reading a newspaper, for example. It's listening to podcasts and things like that, and doing it analytically and actively. So all of those things are very important, and that's what I would recommend for people to do.
I guess it's interesting too, tell me if you disagree or agree, but the biggest challenge they talk about writing. If you can get writing, you're going to do pretty well. Why is that the hardest component of the test?
Well, writing is difficult in IELTS, and that's simply because you can make many more mistakes with writing. When you excuse my cough, by the way, I've got a cold. I'm sitting here in front of the fire, trying to get rid of it.
I'm glad you're not in the studio. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. When you do a writing test, of course, you can make spelling mistakes. You can make punctuation mistakes. You might not answer the question directly. You might misunderstand the question. You may not use paragraphing correctly. There are so many things. Your handwriting might be illegible. So all of these things can affect your writing score. And if it's any consolation to a second language learner, people whose first language is English will often not do as well in writing as they would in speaking for those reasons I've just mentioned. So really, what you have to do is I would recommend, if you want to improve your writing, I would make sure that you read around a lot of topics, because in the task 2 writing, you might be asked to talk about the environment or about things like education or social issues. If you're reading about those things continually, regularly, then you'll have a lot more to say, and you'll have a lot more vocabulary to say it with. In academic writing, of course, you need to be able to quickly understand what's in a graph or in a diagram or in a bar chart, a list of figures. So again, go to the business section of your newspaper or go to the websites that have statistics in them to see lots of examples of that. And when you approach the task, spend some time analysing the task, because if you don't understand the task and you're right off topic, then you will be penalised. And also spend some time reviewing what you've done. That could be the difference between your 6.5 and your 7.
Well, Dom, it seems that learning from our daily life is very important for us to taking the IELTS test in writing especially.
I agree.
Yeah. So we are aware that actually there is an PTE test as well. So what is some of the things that people should consider when choosing between PTE and IELTS?
Well, I can't really talk about PTE because I don't have much experience of it, but there are more than two English language tests. The thing that I can say that differentiates IELTS from those other tests is that it is the most recognised test, 10,000 recognising partners throughout the world. So that means if you get an IELTS score, you can use it for virtually every purpose that you might want to use it, for education, for professional registration, for immigration, for any purpose. The other thing about IELTS is that we offer you a choice. You can do a paper-based test, a paper-delivered test. You can do also, as of a couple of months ago, you can do a computer-delivered test in IELTS. And this is a very important innovation. It has many advantages over the paper-delivered test if you feel more comfortable with computers. And we also give you a choice of an academic test and a general training test. So there's more choice, very much more choice with IELTS.
Don, is it fair to say in today's technology, people seem to be a lot more comfortable typing than talking? So I'm imagining that PTE has always been that technology typing type of setup. So it's now that IELTS are sort of following the trend. Is that fair to say that?
Yeah, that's true. We're following the trend to a degree, but we are retaining the face-to-face speaking test. And the way that the computer-delivered test is delivered in IELTS is, I think, it's quite intimate. You have a very comfortable, quiet room where you are doing the test at the same time as just a few people around you. So you're not getting interference from your neighbour who might be doing a different part of the test. And this I've heard that this is a problem with other computer-delivered tests. So I think the computer-delivered test for IELTS is working out very well, and a lot of people are finding it very suitable for their skills and also for their temperament as well.
Right. Don, you were talking about you've travelled the world and you've been involved in IELTS. And if you'd like to share with us what are some of your experiences when you've discussed with students about how they've prepared for the test? Yeah,
well, it's an interesting one. There are some. I can speak mostly about Vietnam and Oman, so I'll just concentrate on those countries. But in some countries, there is a lot of opportunity to speak English, but not so much in Vietnam. If, for example, you were in Indonesia, you'd have a lot of opportunities to practice your English, and that really shows in Indonesian students. But in Vietnam, for example, there are peculiar challenges, and one of them is pronunciation. So someone who speaks Vietnamese as a first language will have a lot of difficulty making some of the sounds of English, and they need to focus very much on listening to podcasts, imitating native speaker talk, making sure that they don't leave off the ends of words and things like that. Chinese speakers will find that they need to look very hard at grammar, at the tense system in English. Arabic speakers, they will have not many problems with pronunciation, but their problems will come from writing, because their script is so different. It's from right to left. They don't use capital letters. So
I
many
wish we heard Don.
things.
Everyone's just nodding their head in the studio.
Yeah. So,
it's a great thing to look at.
yeah, so they have their own challenges. So really, it's a matter of whatever your first language is, look at what the challenges are for you in particular, and focus on those and do it systematically and regularly.
Yeah, this is so true, Dom. And there are a lot of the IELTS coach around the world internationally. So what are some of the qualities you look for when choosing an IELTS coach?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Zen. Anyone can say that they are an IELTS expert, but they are not always. Some people will tell you that you are doing very well in your preparation, but you might not be. You might be missing something very important. So it's important to make sure that your IELTS coach does understand IELTS very well. Find out what their experience with IELTS is. Find out what their experience with teaching English as a second language is. Ideally, they should be a native speaker. They should be someone who understands English idiom, understands what contexts you use particular words and things like that. And of course, they should be somebody who is very patient and who is willing to not just correct everything that you do, but to just to point out where something might be wrong, and then to get you involved actively in working it out, because that's how you really learn.
That's great. I thought we'd throw to our guests now, who are listening and doing lots of head nodding based on they're all the formal questions, and it's been very helpful. So I want to just throw to the other two people. We have Jason and Chris. Thank you. Terrible memory. Any comments or suggestions you'd like to pass while we have Don?
Don, I think your comments about that for writing, it is something that most people do struggle with. It was what I struggled with as well when I did the test, but it was a very long time ago though. I was only 14 or 15 at that time.
And where did you do that?
I did that back in Vietnam, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And what was your score?
I got a 7.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but I was so it's just about that whole point of you need to educate yourself more on like social issues and things like that. I think that's absolutely spot on, because back then I did not have the necessary knowledge to be able to answer some of the questions. So it was quite overwhelming.
It's an interesting point, Jason, because when you look at an IELTS writing test or a speaking test, for that matter, there is quite a lot of cultural content there as well, and a lot of the things that are discussed, a lot of the issues that are canvassed in an IELTS test are the sorts of ones that you might find a sort of middle-class English person to be enthusiastic about, about urban planning or stuff like that, climate change. And in many countries, those issues are not particularly important. So again, you're right, you have to educate yourself on those sorts of things.
I also found it interesting that you worked in Oman as well, because I was actually born in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. It's actually in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, so it's like on the west side.
I've been to Saudi Arabia, but never to Jeddah. I've only been to Riyadh.
But I've never taken the IELTS test before, but I have known friends who've done the IELTS test, and one thing that they really struggled with was actually writing, because Arabic is starting from right to left, and everything English is the complete opposite of it, and a completely different language, like alphabets and like the whole the whole thing. But it's quite interesting to see how like Arabs can still be able to speak English in a way and pronounce it very well as well.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing with Arabic speakers. They tend to do quite well in the speaking component of the test. And I think in some ways because they're quite charming speakers, and I think this is a cultural thing. If Arabic is your first language, if you come from that culture, you're quite confident and quite relaxed speaking with another person. And so, yeah, that's very true. But when it comes to writing, as you know, there are many challenges there.
And just based on your teaching experience in Vietnam, what would you recommend that Vietnamese students can do in order to increase and improve not only their English skills but also their IELTS test? Because we know that the admission standards in Australia, we do require IELTS test, and we also do require that for employment.
Yeah. I was working at the Hanoi University of Foreign Studies in a program preparing students to come to Australia, but that was a fair while ago. It's about 10 years ago now. And some of the issues, some of the challenges for those students were, as I said, the pronunciation one. That was definitely a problem. But the other problem was that they didn't have a lot of opportunities to use English outside of the classroom. Now that may have changed in Vietnam in the 10 years since I was last teaching there. There may be more of a presence of English in society. Is that true, do you think, Jason, or not?
I think within the last 10 years, there's definitely been a lot more focus on learning English, just among students in general, because I think people are starting to recognize now that if you want to become a globalized citizen, if you want to basically get out of your comfort zone and actually achieve much greater things, that you do need to communicate with people who are not from the same language as you are. So in the last 10 years, there's definitely been a lot more English tutoring going on. A lot more people are going to international schools. I myself came from an international school. Definitely.
So in the absence of being able to speak with native speakers of English, then really you've got to take advantage of all the resources now that are available on the internet as well. So there really is no excuse for not being able to listen and communicate with people in English via the web. So it's a matter of I think I tell my children that routine is an important part of learning. That if they do something at the same time every day, then by the end of the week they will have done 2 or 3 hours at this without even trying. And I think that's an important study skill as well.
I just want to diverse a little bit and just talk about people's attitude along, especially the mass media. When we talk about people's perception, everyone around the table right here knows how challenging and expensive it is to get the right level to be able to get to stay in certain countries. Do you think the general public in Australia, Don, know enough about this, or do they don't want to know? What are your thoughts on just public awareness about the journey of an international person to tick the right boxes?
Well, I mean, it's been in the news a lot lately, hasn't it?
It has.
I think really it varies a lot in Australia. I think most people in Melbourne are pretty aware that when they see a lot of overseas students walking around the streets, that they are overseas students and that they are doing a lot for the economy. I mean, they've paid my rent for many years.
Love your honesty, Don. Love your honesty.
Yeah, I think most urban Australians understand that quite well. But then, of course, I mean, Melbourne is not Australia. If you go, into the back blocks, if you go up to far north Queensland or something, they might have different views. Although, speaking of far north Queensland, I was in Cairns there not long ago, and the overseas students, the backpackers, and I mean they're a great part of that society, and I think they're very much welcome. So I think what we have to do is probably try and ignore some of the loud voices, some of the people who really don't know what they're talking about, and just sort of focus on the realities a bit more.
Very good.
Would you say?
I'd agree, for sure, yes. I think it's an ongoing journey for many people, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Don, I think we wanted to go. I'm sorry?
I very much admire as someone who comes to a foreign country to study. It's something that I've never done, and I think a lot of native English speakers are very lazy in that regard. I studied French at school. I tried to study Arabic for a while, and Indonesian and other things, but I never got very good at any of those things. And I know that most overseas students, English is not their second language; it's probably their third or fourth language.
Exactly. I think we all tend to forget that. Don, I'd like to thank you on behalf of Zen and Empower Your English for your time today. I can see that fire. You probably need to throw another log on it, do you?
Yes. Well, it's a gas fire. I don't want to wreck the fire, so I won't throw a log on it, John.
But thank you so much for joining us. It was a great insight.
Okay, thank you very much, and see you later, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
You're listening to Communicate with Zen and John from Empower Your English.
Well, that was quite an interesting conversation. I think I've actually known Don Oliver for a long time, and he's always enticed me, he excited me, I should say, with regards to his view on the whole concept of English learning and testing. So, how are you all feeling? We might continue the conversation because I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep, definitely.
Very good. So, going back to our list of questions, we're going to start talking about body language. It's an interesting one. I think culture comes into it again, but I'll just throw it to the group again. It's two-way communication method, but how do you use it, and how does it work in some cases for you?
So for me personally, because my work requires me to talk to a vast majority of people from very, very different backgrounds, there are some body language cues which I have learned to be quite universal when it comes to communicating with different backgrounds.
E.g., example, please.
Yep. So what students look for from us is that we be open and that we are receptive to their questions and inquiries. So one particular piece of body language I have learned over the years is that when we talk to someone, we tend to not cross our arms. So we try not to cross our arms, and we try to stand in a much more open stance, if you know what I mean. So no crossing your arm, no tying it, no holding your hands behind your back. None of that. And I feel like that communicates to the students that we are safe, we are open, and we're willing to talk to them. So that's the one piece of body language that I have to use the most, and that I consciously, continuously have to remind myself to do so when I'm talking to students.
And what people can't see right now is your hands haven't stopped. You're doing lots of gestures with your hands. So you are really walking the talk when you talk about body language.
Yeah, I agree. Body language is actually a formal way and non-verbal way of communication. I think it also depends on a lot of cultures, because back in Saudi Arabia, to say wait, you have to cross your fingers like that in a way. So it's to show you have to wait for someone, and usually crossing arms is also very unethical in front of Saudi Arabia. They think it's very rude. So
arrogant? Would you say arrogant?
Arrogant in a way, yes, and saying who do you think you are? Crossing your arms in a way. So yeah, body language is very, very important, especially because growing up I didn't know how to speak Arabic as much, and my parents knew how, but the only way to communicate with retailers or any customers or anything like that was to do a bit of body language and a bit of movements as well to understand what I was trying to say.
And Chris, you're just talking about the fingers, right? Using fingers. Actually, like the mobile phone right now is very popular and very convenient. I think most of us we're using texting instead of speaking. Like, can Jason or Chris tell us about a time where you feel more confident texting with your mobile more than speaking?
Yeah, definitely. I think texting is such a convenient way to communicate with anyone. You can even use now it's like so advanced to the fact that you can even use emojis to express your feelings and your emotions and anything like that. So like language itself could be expressed in so many forms, especially with technology. And I think I've from experience, I've grown up with English as most of the time. So I felt very confident with speaking and writing in both ways. But I think for people who tries to communicate anyone with English and texting, it's okay. I think it's fine. It's part of our learning process. And it's quite interesting, like how technology can help that.
You know what we need? Emojis in the IELTS test. Think if you're still there, Don, I think that'd be awesome. All right, did you choose the right emoji for your written test?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we can get a very high score then.
Yeah, 100%.
Especially if you can make your own.
Yeah. I feel like when I'm texting someone, I feel that not all of what I'm trying to communicate does come through just on words, because I feel that a lot of things that we say, we don't just interpret the words, we interpret the body language, the facial expressions that do come with what we're trying to say. Someone can say something and that can mean completely two different it completely has two different meanings just based on the facial expressions or the body language itself. But I would feel much more confident texting if I've been having a very, very long day of a lot of interactions and a lot of talking, so I might come off as uninterested or unenthusiastic if we were talking face to face. But through text, I can still convey that I am open and that I'm willing to listen and understand the people's inquiries or their concerns and questions. So, yeah.
I guess I'll take the risk of sounding like a dinosaur now when I talk about the negatives of texting, because you've just got to use so much imagination when you receive a text. How were they feeling? It feels like I lacked the tone of voice. I lacked, so it leaves lots of questions in my mind when I receive a text. So what do you think, Zen? Texting.
Testing. I would say personally I prefer like face-to-face communication because I think I'm type of the dinosaurs as well.
Hey, good.
Yeah, because I feel like the body language actually can deliver a lot of the message that we can't see on the test. So yeah, I think that's my opinion.
But it's interesting. You talk about texting, but how about a photo? Sending photos, which is sort of another form of communication, isn't it?
Snapchat.
Yeah, this is all communication. And with Snapchat, is that empowered communication?
Well, I would say that for Snapchat, it's a type of communication, but I think that throughout, so when we're going forward in technology, I feel that our communication has gotten less and less, how should I say it? We put less and less investment in our communication with new technology coming out. I mean, it used to be like, so talking face to face would have to involve your entire body language and facial expression, and then we got writing letters, which is just words, and now we got Snapchat, which is literally just a picture. We don't even have to say anything.
That's right. But it still leaves question marks, doesn't it, in our minds to sort of say, I might follow up and ring that person about the photo. Oh my God, what's happened now? The phone's ringing.
Well, I think it actually brings people a lot closer when it comes to photos and everything, because you can actually see them. Or even like now on Apple, you can do FaceTime. So it's another form of communication. You can still verbally talk to someone even across from different parts of the world. So I think that's what's powerful about technology and how communication is able to be from a different part of the world as well, which is quite cool.
What I really in relation to photos and communication and connecting. Photos of food. Let's be honest. That's all out there, isn't it? But what a great icebreaker to talk to people about. Did you cook that? Where did you buy that? Or what's in it? What's it taste like? You finding that with regards to just general communication with food as pictures?
So that's going to be like a lot of tagging on Facebook when it comes to food pictures.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, it takes less and less investment in order to just communicate something to someone nowadays. So I feel like, yes, I agree with Chris. It does bring people closer together, just because all the technology nowadays makes it just so much easier to get in touch and just to stay in touch with someone. Like, I have friends over in the United States, and I practically know what they're doing 24/7 because it's all there.
Do you know what they have for breakfast or dinner?
Yes, I actually do.
It's creepy. And the other part, of course, that we can't avoid, and that's the famous email. That's different, isn't it? Because it's study, it's business, has a different tone. And there's a whole aspect around CCing and BCCing. So it's interesting.
Yeah, so email is very common. So how about when it is or is not appropriate to use CC or BCC in the email?
So, in Muse, we communicate with outside stakeholders and also the MSA through emails mainly. MSA is the Monash Student Association.
Yeah.
So we are a division under.
Yeah. I might actually stop too, because believe it or not everybody knows CC or BCC.
Oh.
Okay, so I think we can't presume that. For those people who are not aware, CC stands an old-fashioned carbon copy, and BCC is a blind carbon copy. So I can send an email to Jason, and I've CC'd Zen, which means Zen knows the conversation, but also can BCC Krisha, who doesn't know. I'm just turning this upside down, aren't I? But BCC is basically, you've got someone on that email, but they don't know, the sender or the receiver doesn't know that person's reading that email.
Yep.
So I think it is very political. Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
I just thought it's worth clarifying so we all know what it is.
Yep. So for CCing, what we want to do is when we have a piece, an email that we send, so we send it to the receiver. The receiver is the person who needs to take an action regarding that email, but the person who we CC to is the person who we just want to inform that there's this thing going on, and that person who received the email needs to take an action, but the person who is in our CC doesn't actually need to do anything, if you understand what I mean. And for BCC, that is when the information is sensitive. So, like handling a complaint. So if one of my executive or one of my committee member is handling a complaint from a student through email, and they would like to BCC me into that email so I can see what is going on, but the student who is writing that complaint would not know that I get to know what is happening, and I get to know what action is getting taken. So I'm personally not doing anything about the email if I get BCC or CC'd. It's just for your information kind of thing.
Very good.
You're listening to Communicate
Just
with
top
Zen
loaded.
and John from Empower Your English.
And we'd like to also thank the people we've got at the moment, our guests. If you just joined us on Communicate, we have
Jason
from
MUS, the Monash University International Student Service.
and
I am Chris. I'm also a member of MUS, and I'm a part of the activities portfolio.
And Sen from Empower Your English.
I'm John, and we're having a great conversation about all aspects of being empowered when communicating. So, we're up to question.
Wow. Apart from the communication, right now we move on to the employment. I think this is a big topic for everyone, right? So, Chris and Jason, I would like to ask the questions related to interview. So, the interview process can be quite intense, as we all know. We heard everything your strengths and weaknesses before the interview. Does it work for you?
It's like with strengths with English.
Yeah, like
Yes,
Yes, kind of
strengths, but also with interview, you're selling
like
yourself.
how do you?
You interview the job interview is all about pitching yourself and making sure they recognise you and remember you.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. What exactly what John said is trying to present yourself in front of the interviewee, because it's one thing to be able to get the job. It's to impress the person who's trying to employ you, and I think the most important thing is to be actually like get prepared for it. Rehearse yourself, I guess, or record yourself in a way, or like do it with someone who you're comfortable with, and try to act like you're inside a job interview. I've only had a job interview once, and
Did you get it?
I actually got it, but I actually declined it.
Oh, all right.
What was the job? What was it?
It was a sales job actually, in somewhere in St. Kilda. They really liked the way I was presenting myself, and I was able to communicate English. That was one thing they were looking for, is like if I was really good at English, or like to be able to sell myself, or like sell like a product. So I think that's what every employers are looking for, is that you could be able to communicate with everyone around you. Or like another bonus would be like speaking another language, I guess, like not just English itself, but just to like show yourself that you have a lot more knowledge than just English, which will be quite like handy in all the jobs, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, so as a fourth year student, I'm moving on to my final year next year, which means that I really need to find myself an internship soon. So for the interview process itself, I've also had only one or two interviews in my life. So I used to be a training manager for this organization called RoboGals.
What was it called?
RoboGals. So what this organization does is it tries to empowers girls and women, young girls and women, to undertake a STEM career or course in university. So to practice for my interview, there are standard questions that we need to answer, and also of course we have to talk about our strengths and weaknesses. But I believe that in preparing for your interview, it doesn't just start from the moment that you receive the interview request. It actually starts from much before that, where you actually need to have strengths. You actually need to have something that you can sell yourself on. So I would say that for preparing for your interviews, you actually need to do something beforehand. You need to volunteer beforehand. You need to be part of some projects, be part of a group. Teamwork is very important nowadays. I think businesses are starting to recognize that it's not enough to just hire very, very intelligent people, but you need to hire people who can work in a team. So, yeah, it's just to sell yourself on being able to work in a team. But of course, you need to have already been working in a team in order to sell yourself like that.
It's interesting when you use the word team. I've been involved in many interviews, and when you answer questions and say we, it does make the interview panel not clear on, but what are your skills? What role did you play? So that's always a risk. I agree that it's great to have a great team culture, but at interview, I want to see what, I hear you worked in a team, and it's a great team, but at the moment you're going for this job. So tell us what special goal do you have? What's your point of difference that's going to get this job? So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yep, definitely.
So this gets back to another part of the interviewing whole thing is around passion. Interesting word when trying to promote yourself, and without being too silly, but how do you use words or other forms of communication to show you're really passionate for this job? I want it.
So for me, because at the beginning of the year, when we're trying to recruit committee members for our international student service, what we look for is how much they really know about us, and how much they know about the international students, maybe international student struggles, or how much they know about understanding what it's like to be an international student, whether they can relate to the normal international students. So what I would say is that to show your passion, you need to do your research on the company that you're applying for, on the position that you're applying for. I recently was applying for a summer internship at Telstra, and basically for all of my application questions and all of my interview questions, I try to weave in their they have a 2022 global plan for Telstra, what they want to achieve, what they're trying to do, and what their culture is, what they expect from their employees. So I have to do my research on all of those things in order to show that, yes, I actually care about Telstra. I don't just care about getting a job, getting paid, but I care about what Telstra is trying to do, what Telstra is trying to achieve as a company. And I sell myself on being the person who is passionate about sharing that same goal and also trying to help them achieve what they want to achieve. So that is how I show my passion. And I believe that is what employees and all employers would also look for.
Such a challenge with such a huge company like Telstra that has different cultures within itself.
Definitely.
You know, so that's really hard.
Yeah, I agree, because to show my passion, I've actually done a lot of volunteering stuff and leadership roles back in high school. And my passion is because I want to help international students like me. And I feel like, because I was in high school where it's mostly local dominated. So it was more like there was a segregation between the locals and the international students. And luckily there was an opportunity back in high school where you can actually be a prefect, which is basically an international, like a leader or something like that, like where you can make a group and then try to help international students out with studies or try to communicate with others as well. So I was voted to become one, and the whole time my teacher would tell me I've become an inspiration in front of everyone, because I'm trying to make international students be confident to be able to talk to teachers or even ask questions, raise their hands, because I've seen them not become just be quiet in class and just sit in the corner and not say anything. And that's why I wanted to make a change, and I wanted to do something different and try to say empower your English, that kind of thing. And that's why becoming and applying for activities portfolio back in US was also another thing, because I wanted to pursue that. I wanted to continue doing that, and because I've always been passionate about doing those things. So I think whenever you're passionate about something, go for it. Just when the opportunity is out there, just grab it while you can.
I loved what you said earlier in the conversation when we talk about volunteering. I think people, especially within Australia, if I could just make the comment, that people don't realise how powerful that can be to see that on a resume. We see lots of results and academic results, that's good, but to know you're doing something because you want to do it and there's no money into it, it's sort of, for me, it's something that I'll often go to when I'm looking at CVs. I'll go straight to the bottom to find out, silly enough, why are people putting that at the top? To say that it's part of their profiling themselves, that I'm passionate about the environment, or I love war on waste. I watch this TV show all the time, so it's interesting.
Yeah, John, that's a great idea. Put the volunteer experience on the top of the CV. Talking about the CV, actually, we will have the workshop coming on the 28th August on Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the city. If you're interested to come to our workshop, you can go to our website, inow.melbourne, to have a look.
And we might even just spell that. That's EYENOW.Melbourne. So yeah, that's going to be a great workshop, and Empower Your English have been running workshops on different themes over many months, not just about employment, but also just about passenger safety. We did a gig the other day, a few months ago now, seems just the other day, with Metro Trains, just around facing discrimination and things that passengers sometimes come up against. goes back to communication. So yeah, please have a look at our website. We are very excited about this one coming up where we have an expert talking about exactly that around how to write a CV and what it should look like and what's important. So it's good. So I think we've nearly 7 o'clock, is it? I can't see the clock. Almost 7 o'clock. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our guests. I think it's been a very stimulating conversation. And any closing comments from anybody?
So just some final comments about the employment part. I think for these days, a lot of companies are not only looking for your academic work, of course, is absolutely great, but a lot of companies are trying to make a change in their community, and what they're also looking for is people who are also passionate about making a change in their community. So if you say that you would like you are a person who cares for the community and cares about giving back to society, it's not enough to just say so. You have to actually show that you actually do care, and that is mostly through volunteering work, where you are volunteering your time without getting anything in return. And I think companies do look for people with that kind of commitment, with that kind of passion.
For sure. It was, it also sort of makes the interview more exciting because you're talking from the heart.
Yeah.
It gives you that opportunity to sort of say, and guess what I did? This is on the weekend I did this. It wasn't paid, but this is where the real person comes out in interview because of the voluntary work. So that's been all good. So we are planning to come back next Tuesday.
Oh, sorry, John.
No,
next Thursday.
Thursday, aren't I silly? We're allowed to make mistakes.